Hi, my name is Eric Herman. I teach Spanish to grades 3rd through 8th at the Edgartown School on Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. I want to talk about speed reading, reading fluency, and a Spanish speed reading course written for Spanish learners. In speed reading, a student first reads as fast as he or she can a story. Then he or she takes a quiz of general understanding without looking back at the reading. Then, and finally, the student will grade his or her own answers without looking back at the quiz. Reading fluency is the ability to read fast with a good general understanding. In the second language and foreign language acquisition research, we see that speed reading is the most effective and efficient means of increasing reading fluency. In order to complete a speed reading, a student needs a copy of the readings, a pencil, a scrap piece of paper, and a graph. The first thing the student does is write his or her name. In this case, it's Hannah. Hannah writes her name on the graph, and at the bottom, records the number of the reading and the date. The student then opens up her course book to the reading she plans to do. So let's say, in this case, she's going to do reading number 1. You can see number 1 at the top. She then does not start reading, but can cover it up with her graph or simply place the manual face down and wait for the teacher's instructions. The teacher projects an online stopwatch or can record time and erase times manually, and we'll show you how. In my class, I simply go to www.online-stopwatch.com and can then project the time so that all students, when they finish, can just look up and record the time it took them to complete the reading. Alternatively, we can write the times manually here by multiples of 10, and as the time goes by, the teacher would erase that time while looking at a watch or a clock. And so, let's say a minute goes by, the teacher erases number 1. Minute 10 goes by, the teacher erases minute 10. And so the student just looks up and sees the next time not erased and records that as his or her time. When the teacher says to begin, the student can remove the graph and begin reading. When she reaches the bottom and does not need to look back and is ready to take the quiz, she looks up and notices what time it took her to finish in and records that time on the graph. So in this case, we can see time on the left vertical axis. And the first time, her first reading, it took her 3 minutes and 40 seconds to finish. That's what that X there indicates. If we scroll to the right, we can see that was a rate of 109 words per minute. Okay, the next thing the student does is flip to the quiz. We look second half of the course book. So we'll flip to quiz number 1. Here we are. You can see each quiz has 10 multiple choice questions. Each question has 4 options. The student does not write on the booklet, but uses the scrap piece of paper for marking answers. When the student finishes marking all answers to all 10 questions, then she would flip to the answer key. Okay, so we flip at the back. Here we are. The answer key. She checks her own answers, and then once knowing how many she got right out of 10, she can record that on her graph. You can see here she wrote, on the first one, she actually got 100. Okay, so here we are. She received 100. And as we want them to be reading fast, for general understanding, we encourage them, if they're getting over a 70, to try to read even faster the next time. And in this case, she did actually show improvement so far, and in general, on every reading she's completed. Okay? The student then passes in all of her materials, and in my class, the student would then grab the book he or she is working on for independent reading. This speed reading course contains 30 stories and 30 quizzes. Each story has exactly 400 words. Each quiz has 10 multiple choice questions. All of the words from both the stories and the quizzes are within the highest frequency 300 Spanish words, according to A Frequency Dictionary of Spanish by Mark Davies. Also included are cognates. Those are the words that have a similar form and meaning in Spanish and English. And there are also 50 non-cognate words such as hola, and if those words are not obvious from context, then they are glossed at the first occurrence of the word. And again, if the word is essential to meaning in a future reading. This speed reading course is graded, which means that every story is a little bit harder than the prior story. And that's because every story parallels the language from a specific lesson of a chapter from the student book, Spanish New Mini Stories for Look I Can Talk by Blaine Ray Workshops. But this speed reading course should not only appeal to those teachers using the Look I Can Talk curriculum, but also for any teacher wanting their students to acquire as well as increase reading fluency with the highest frequency language and structures of the Spanish language. In a speed reading course, the primary focus is on increasing speed. Therefore, the readings should be easy. That's why the vocabulary is highly controlled, as well as the grammatical structures. The stories are written predominantly in the present tense, and the sentences are generally short. What will also make the stories easy to read is that background knowledge should be activated. Anyone already familiar with the classic Teaching with Proficiency Through Reading and Storytelling plot, TPRS for short, anyone familiar with the TPRS plot knows that a character wants something and goes to 3 locations to try to find it. And in general, these stories follow that pattern. What also makes the stories easier, as well as more fun to read, is the fact that the plots and the characters should be known as well as relevant to the students' lives. The characters are celebrities, fairy tale characters, as well as cartoon characters. There are numerous benefits to speed reading, and those are listed in the course book. But to name a few, the reading and the quiz would provide a student with more comprehensible input, and that is theorized to drive language acquisition. The activity would require a student to focus on meaning, which is an essential characteristic of the acquisition process. And then reading fluency and reading for pleasure have a reciprocal relationship. As reading fluency increases, that can start a virtuous cycle in which a student reads faster and thus reads more, and then comes to understand more of what the student is reading, and that can lead to greater enjoyment of reading. We want students reading not too slowly, but not too fast. When students read slowly, they get less comprehensible input, and it can also lower comprehension, because by the time they reach the end of the sentence, they may not remember the start of the sentence, or they may not remember the previous paragraph. But students that read too fast, what is referred to as skinning or scamming, may not actually be seeing all the words on the page, which would make it hard to then comprehend the passage. And that limit from studies that track eye movements find that it's physically impossible to read much faster than 300 words per minute and still see all the words on a page. Because the readings should be easy, the students should be able to achieve the expectation of a 70% comprehension score, and thus feel successful, while also graphing their speed increases. Seeing that graph will be further motivating for the student. The teacher can also see that progress. And the students should feel empowered that they can read, that they can be successful readers and read independently. So a speed reading course can serve as a gateway to more independent reading. Not to mention that this time on learning gives the teacher a break while the students work independently for 5 to 10 minutes. It is recommended that a speed reading course be supplemented with a free voluntary reading program. In school systems, that's often known as drop everything and read, or silent sustained reading, or self-selected reading, or extensive reading. It goes by many names. But speed reading should increase a student's ability to read faster Thus, during those times of independent reading, the student can get more reading done. And after a speed reading course has been completed, the student has a means of maintaining as well as continuing to increase their reading fluency. And a speed reading course is efficient because all of these gains can be obtained with only 5 hours total class time to complete the 30-story speed reading course. I was able to locate 8 research studies of speed reading courses within a second language or foreign language context. And in these studies we see that speed increases on immediate and delayed post-tests, that comprehension either is maintained or even slightly increased. The gains are gradual and continue throughout the course and even transfer to reading fluency in other languages and on passages that have not been practiced and are of a different genre. And students report that the activity increased their concentration, their confidence, and even their knowledge. And there has been a study showing that speed reading increases language memory span. In the case that the students already know the highest frequency 300 words and already have the reading skill, then they can complete an intensive speed reading course. In that case, they would read 1 to 3 readings per week over a period of 6 to 12 weeks, and that's how it's done in the research. It's recommended that students complete 3 readings per week with the feeling that more frequency is better. In order to check that students know the words necessary to complete the speed readings, there is a 300 high-frequency word checklist with instructions included in the manual. And there's also the option of just letting students try different speed readings, especially those from the latter part of the course. And if they can successfully achieve a 70% or higher on the comprehension quiz, then the readings are on their level. If it's found that all of the readings are on the student's level, then the student can complete the course in any order. They just record the number of the reading they completed on their graph. The speed readings can be repeated if a student wanted to try to increase his or her speed, or let's say the student did not achieve a 70% comprehension score, that student can try again the same reading at a later time. The speed readings can also be completed for homework. There's also the option of completing an intermittent speed reading course. In this case, students would complete 1 speed reading per week or even 1 per 2 weeks. For teachers using the Look I Can Talk curriculum, it may take you 1 to 2 weeks to complete the 3 steps of TPRS in order to ensure sufficient comprehension of each story in the speed reading course. Then, at the end of the 3 steps of TPRS, the teacher would assign the parallel speed reading. The purpose is to then increase reading fluency, but also give the teacher feedback, a way to assess the knowledge of the language and structures and assess reading competency. It's also recommended that the speed readings be used as acquired competency evaluations. Acquired competence means the ability to use language unconsciously, without thinking. And that is our source of fluency. In order to use language rapidly, we have to be able to do it without a lot of conscious thought. And whenever we assess fluency, we are, in effect, assessing acquired competence. I would argue that this speed reading process and the particular content in this course have real-world language validity. In the real world, language use is spontaneous, unrehearsed, time-pressured, the focus is on meaning, and by definition, we're exposed more to those words of higher frequency. For example, the highest frequency 50 words of English make up 60% of spoken English. And this speed reading course satisfies each of those conditions. As a way to measure acquired reading competence, this is also very practical. It's quick and it's easy to score. It also would have a positive backwash effect. In other words, if students knew this was how they were going to be assessed, what would they do to prepare for it? They would need to read more and to also work on increasing their reading fluency. And the activity itself provides the students with an opportunity to further their acquisition. The stories and quizzes in this course don't have to only be used for speed reading. The readings can be used for a whole class reading, individual or group reading, as well as a repeated reading activity. And the readings can also be used for listening fluency activities, such as read-alouds, and can be used for dictogloss or dictation.